Hi, friends. This episode is for law partners at corporate law firms. Would you like to protect yourself from deceptive legal recruiters? If so, stay tuned. So, welcome Dan and Gary to the Future is Bright podcast. Again, it's wonderful to have you guys on the show.
Thank you. It's
Thank you,
great to
Chris.
be here.
Great to be here.
So, for people who don't know who you are or the first time listening to the show, could you guys just provide a very brief introduction to you?
Go ahead, Dan.
Sure. My name is Dan Binstock. I'm a partner at Garrison. We're a longtime attorney search firm. We are based in Washington, D.C., and do work in major markets throughout the United States. Before becoming a recruiter, I was an IP attorney at Finnegan Henderson. I've been recruiting for almost 20 years now, do partners and practice groups, and it's always great to hang out with Chris and Gary.
Thanks, Dan. My name is Gary Miles. Miles Partner Placement is my company, which we founded in 2015. Prior to that, I started in the industry, back in 2007 at Allen Miles and Associates. I've been recruiting partners for the most part, practice groups and some firm mergers for those 17 years that I've kind of been in this, and work in most major markets domestically. Have had the opportunity to do some stuff internationally and kind of expanding that element of our practice. And before I got into legal recruiting, I was a high school basketball coach and taught middle school, at-risk youth middle school in Los Angeles, Watts, and Compton, California. So it's a pleasure to be here again with Dan and Chris, two of my favorite people in the industry, and look forward to today's discussion.
So let's jump in. We've got two kind of big topics we want to jump on. One of them being legal recruiters and things that we find in the market, you gentlemen are seeing in the market that is shady, kind of unscrupulous, unprofessional, and does not serve clients or candidates in the slightest. Want to talk about the role of NAUSC, the benefit to everybody there, ups and downs, and then also we're going to talk about associate comp. So why don't we jump in and talk about what you guys are seeing that kind of tarnishes the image of recruiters?
Yeah. So, do you want to start with this one, Gary? I started with the intro, so you can start with this one.
Well, okay, so I think and Dan actually I thought wrote a really good piece that was I believe was in the law.com and American Lawyer digital editions in the last week or two. We've seen a proliferation, I think, of internationally based, particularly London, I think, recruiting shops who are really using methods like particularly like email blasts where they are, making it appear that they've been asked by some firm to reach out to a partner specifically, directly, that it's been strategically backed, and but at the same time not revealing anything really about the firm, qualifying, saying, oh, except it's an AmLaw top 50 firm or global top 100 firm. Uh, Kind of like these mass email phishing experiments where if a partner isn't careful, they end up talking to and maybe sharing information with someone who really has no connection to any firm, let alone said firm. And, they get caught in these conversations where uh, that might be detrimental to their career in terms of their information being shared. Who knows where it's dispersed? Um, you know, that's just one example, but we're seeing a ton of those. I think we're seeing, recruiters use the bots and the chats and the even the kind of like some of the phone calls, the AI generated phone calls. It's really, really interesting to see that coming this way. And then of course, we've all seen over the years um, recruiters who will go nameless that have historically operated what I would consider outside the bounds of what would be ethical performance in terms of working both on behalf of candidates, trying to get candidates, but also with respect to how they represent firms and their connection to firms, etc. So, I do think it's a growing problem in our industry. And I think partners need to be very specific and wary about who you're talking to, the level of capability of the person you're dealing with, and what your expectations are in dealing with that person, because otherwise it could go sideways quickly.
Yeah, agree. And I think from my perspective, I agree with everything you said, Gary. I think about this problem. Why do we have this problem with such smart people, the brightest of the bright, attorneys at top Wall Street firms, getting wrapped up with these really kind of shady people? And I think there are three things that contribute to it. The first one is there is no regulatory authority or license or anything that you need to become a legal recruiter. You can
Right.
be selling boats in the morning and decide to hang up, order, get a website that afternoon and just start recruiting attorneys. Zero bar to entry. And I think a lot of lawyers assume that people know what they're talking about when they call, or why would they be dishonest? So most lawyers don't realize that there's absolutely no bar to entry. Many other industries, real estate agents, things like that, realtor licensed in order to just protect consumers. None of that in the legal recruiting industry. The second thing is most attorneys are never educated on how legal recruiters work. They're not taught this in law school. They're not taught this anytime outside, of law school. It's not really taught that often in continuing legal education, and most people don't want to be attending these things because of confidentiality. You don't want to, attend how do recruiters work because it outs you. And then the third thing is a lot of people that are drawn to recruiting or sales in general tend to be people that maybe are really good talkers and may not have the highest ethical barometers and may fudge the corners a little bit. So when you put all of these things together, it's kind of a recipe for certain types of unethical behavior, especially. Oh, the fourth thing is you have a ton of money at stake. If someone lies, they can trick you into it, but
Big
then they have to
incentive.
benefit a couple $100,000 if they place a partner.
Yeah.
So for them, some people really don't have the barometer ethically or spiritually, whatever it is that kind of helps people make the right decision. So you put all of these four things together, and it's a little bit of a recipe for disaster in the market. And that's why we see certain things going on in the market. And to make it even worse, certain bad actors are rewarded because certain law firms will say, you know what? We don't care how they get the candidates. As long as they get the candidates, we just want to have a crack at them. So it proliferates this type of behavior. Now, those firms that say that are definitely in the minority, but there are still enough of them where they don't want to turn away a candidate. It's kind of like, the way I see it is, in a way, it's sort of like someone buying a TV that was stolen off a truck. It's like, all right, well, look, I'm getting a brand new Samsung $4,000 TV. I only have to pay $750. I don't really care where they got it from, but I'm benefiting and it's going to be better for us. And it may not be the most apt, but it's kind of the way that I think about it in a way. So Gary, why do you think that some of these firms, or Chris as well, because I know you do a lot of this too, Chris, but your perspectives on kind of why this has continued.
Chris, you want to jump in?
I, you know, so I think it goes back to uniformity. I think it goes back to regulatory. I think it goes back to there's a lot of firms out there, and there's still quality, and there's ethics that are not consistent across the board. But you know, um, partners play a big part in the future of firms, and especially if they're bringing 7, 8 figure books of business or more. Um, a lot of quote unquote ethics go out the door. Um, and yeah,
I can't say if someone came to us and said, Dan, we've got an amazing recruiter. They want to join your company. This is what they've been producing. You know them. They've got a great reputation. They want to talk to you. I'm not sure I would say, sorry, recruiter, I didn't like the way that you got them. I may say, I'm not going to use you in the future, but I'm not sure I would want to turn something away just based on that. It's a really hard decision.
Yeah. To jump in, I think, what both of you said is it kind of like I think it's even more from the firm's perspective. I think law firms, okay, um, make a lot of them that I've talked to over the years and asked them this very question, like, you know, you obviously want recruiting relationships with shops that have a standard of ethics, a standard of quality in terms of how you interact with them and and what they try to bring you with respect to candidates and what have you. But at the same time, we all know that really large law firms strategically look at increasing the top line one of two ways, right? We could really say a third. One, you can grow the relationships you have with clients organically, internally, and try to grow the wallet share of revenue that you get from those clients versus the competing firms that also service those clients. Very hard thing to do, right? Probably the most difficult time, lengthiest process in terms of growing revenue. Two, you can grow through bringing in lateral partners who have either synergistic relationships, shared clients, and preferably as well as new clients that align with your firm's strategy and hopefully increasing the revenue pie that way. Or three, you can acquire entities, right, that have a stable, consistent business base, other firms, okay? Number two is actually, of those three, is actually probably the 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 easiest to track over a long time and to accomplish. We all know that, doing the bigger the deal gets, the more complicated it gets, the more chance it has of falling through. So most firms understand that we have to be growing. If we're not growing, it's always been said in the market, if you're not growing, you're shrinking, right? Even if you're staying the same, the perception is you're shrinking as everyone else that you find competing with you is growing. So when you lay that down as the foundational context, you then see firms saying, yeah, we like recruiters and try to build bridges with recruiters and relationships that kind of have, a real ethical compass. They listen to what we're looking for. They bring to us candidates attractive. But at the same time, one, we don't want to miss out on a candidate that looks like they could be accretive. And the quiet or silent sophistication behind that is also, a lot of firms think that if they do the deal with the quote unquote unethical recruiter, at least for some period of time, according to their fee agreement, that person will not be calling their lawyers trying to move someone out of their firm. So it gets to be a cost benefit analysis. While I would argue that, and can point to several historical examples that I personally know of, that doesn't always work out that way. I think
doesn't.
that's a consideration that goes on with firms. And I actually know firms and talk to people where they've blocked, you know, access, email access or phone, access to any of their partners, but the recruiting personnel will still get the submissions from the shop where that stuff has been blocked, right? So the firms,
You want to know?
so
Do you
go
want to
ahead.
know how some recruiters are trying to get around that?
Yeah, I know. It's
Yeah,
crazy.
so certain firms, they've got certain recruiters who they will not work with because these recruiters are so unethical. And they've put blocks in their systems saying that if this person's name comes up in any of the emails,
Right.
their last name, it's going to automatically block them. So what these recruiters do is, and their signature blocks, instead of having it, their normal name, they'll keep changing their email addresses, their domain names, but then they'll put a JPEG image of their signature block because they'll assume that that can't be tracked by the firm's system. So that's another way that they can get through.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah, it's crazy.
and
Um,
and the multiple VPNs, right? Where you call and it gives you an area code, like you are actually in that city when you're calling from Turks and
right.
Caicos or somewhere, and right,
But,
like you're on a beach.
yeah. Can I let me jump in also and
Yeah,
just share kind of an alternative perspective on this? The world of legal recruiting and the world of hiring attorneys from legal recruiters is very short-term oriented. The mindset, all revenue, all reporting, it's all done on a 12-month annual basis. The way partners are paid are short-term oriented. So firms that tend to compromise if they have values or not, and if they don't have stated values, they're definitely displaying it through trying to work with unscrupulous recruiters, but it's very short-term oriented, and it really reveals the values of what the firm thinks about, which many times is short-term thinking.
Yeah.
And so it may not even be considering the seeds that are being sown, when they could be done with a recruiter that truly gets results, shows loyalty, and brings excellent quality to the table. And so I think personally it comes back to strategy and embracing of values, knowing that this affects our firm long term.
yeah,
And yeah, exactly. And it's a tough thing, and it is a growing problem because this is not just it really the result of this is what happens is you get a partner that will come to lunch with a firm or they'll have a meeting and then the firm will go, so we're really glad, we're really glad that you wanted to speak to us. And then the partner will say, I thought my recruiter told me that I was on a short list of people who you wanted to talk to. And then it's really uncomfortable. It's not something that then they both, oh, those recruiters, da da da. And then, sometimes they can get past it. But the internal recruiting department gets really frustrated. Some of the partners get really taken back by that. The candidates themselves get taken back. And it starts off the relationship on just a level of
process.
dishonesty.
Yeah,
And the recruiters that do this type of stuff, they have like boiler rooms. They've got 4 or 5 people just calling. They've got to dial 40, 50 people a day. And they're just literally, it's like roulette. They're just like a slot machine. They're just pulling through. And once um, and it's hard to figure out what is the best thing to do about it. And I think part of it is just education for us to talk about. Hopefully, the article that we wrote in the American Lawyer about that. Hopefully, that's getting shared. And thank you guys for sharing that. But I think it's really something that the industry needs to take on directly. And there's some other things that are happening right now within NALSC to try to, we're kind of kicking around some different ways to try to approach this. But one of them is through the code of ethics. And I don't know, Chris, if you wanted to talk about this more, but we can hop into
Let's
that.
go let's go there. I've got another question around this, but let's go ahead and jump in about
I
nows.
mean, why don't you ask your question, then we can jump there and flex
Okay,
it.
so my basic question for the both of you is, what can partners do?
so let me jump in here, Dan, because I think and you probably you and I have talked about this. Maybe you'll have some added insight. I
Yep.
think it's really important if you're a partner who's really busy, who's got your own active practice, you've got your own life outside of your practice, like, I think you really want to ask some very basic, but very straightforward questions of anybody that recruits you. It always amazes me that partners, whether they're litigators or transactional lawyers, spend like so much a percentage of their time doing diligence for their clients on different whatever the types of matters, whatever the client's strategic, needs are in any specific area of practice. You do so much diligence, so much, preparation, so much finding out of what different things are going to impact your client's situation in any given, context of business that they're involved in. Yet when it comes to a partner's career and whether they're going to make one of the most important decisions that they have to make about if I'm going to move from my firm, and if so, where am I going to go? What's going to be the best fit for me and my practice? What's the potential for long-term success? A lot of partners won't do any diligence. They'll
Yeah.
just get a call. They'll hear something. They'll think that the recruiter is like, oh, and the recruiter, of course, could be playing into their sense of pride and ego about who they are. But at the end of the day, you need to do some diligence if you are a partner thinking about moving your practice. You need to find out, you know, is the recruiter you're working with, what's their track record in terms
Yep.
of placing people like you, who, when they say they're calling and pitching a firm opportunity, what is the likelihood or that they are connected to that firm through past work, but also at what level are they connected to that
Yep.
firm, right? Are they
Yep.
connected where they're just dealing solely with the recruiting department? Are
Yep.
they are they connected where they're dealing with the recruiting department and other, executive levels of the firm? How high do those connections go?
Yeah.
Uh, Ask them
They can,
about how they run a
yeah.
process. Ask a recruiter how long
Sure.
they've been in the business. See if the recruiter's gotten any recognitions for what they've done in the
Yeah.
business. Where are they on thought leadership, etc. Right? Like there are a lot of avenues that, as a lawyer for a client, the lawyer would go down and chase down every avenue of diligence. Do some of those for yourself.
Yeah. Let me jump in, and this is Dan for you to speak up. Dan, I'm a recruiter, and I'm giving you a call about this outrageous deal, and you're a partner with 10 million or business or more. What questions are you going to ask me?
Okay, so you want to mock it? Do you want to be?
Hey,
You want,
Dan, I hear you're this amazing IP litigator, and I've got this firm that is so excited. They gave me your name. They really want to talk to you. Best restaurant in DC. Are you available on this day or this day at noon to do lunch?
oh, well, thank you for calling me, Chris. I'm always flattered to get a recruiter call. Let me just ask you, out of curiosity, who was it at the law firm that asked you to call me?
Well, it's one of those top guys, and maybe a practice group leader, an EC member. I can't remember, but it was one of those guys.
Well, yeah, I would just be. I always like to know who's calling me. Who specifically
Yeah,
asked
this
to
is
reach
Chris.
out.
I'm giving you a call.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. I'd like to find out who it was that asked you to call me. I get a lot of these calls, as you
Hmm.
can understand, and
I know, but it's confidential, and I really can't disclose my clients' names. I'm happy to tell you a little bit about them, but they'd
yeah,
really like to meet with you over this amazing meal. They know you walk on water. They might be even interested in you leading the practice team. Why
yeah.
would you pass this up?
Well, I don't even know which firm it is, so I couldn't even tell you
Okay,
my opinion of
so it's
them.
AmLaw 100 firm.
It's wonderful. So I would probably say, Chris, I gotta go. I'm really busy. Um, Best take, but if let's say you just said, you know what? Let's say you drop the name of a practice group leader, say Joe Smith.
Okay.
It's Joe Smith, the practice group leader. He wanted us to call you. So let's do that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So this amazing litigator also wants to add IP to the team and have them lead the show. It's Joe Smith. Have you heard of him?
Sure. I know of him. I so why do you, do you mind me asking why specifically he was interested in having you call me?
Well, you were ranked in chambers. I know you're at a firm doing XYZ profits per partner. I know your bill rate's got to be this level. And, I know you got to be having a book of business around 10 million or more. He would delighted to talk to you, have a meal.
Right, and I appreciate that. I just want to know, did he specifically tell you to call me, or am I on a list of people, or is this you sort of just reaching out to people who match the general profile? And this is really important in order for us to have a conversation, Chris, at all, even for you possibly to help me hire people in the future. I need to be very clear on this point.
Dan, you're a smart guy. And I know you would not want to miss this opportunity. So I wanted to know if you wanted to have a game-changing conversation to have lunch with this
Well,
practice group leader who
Chris,
dropped your
all
name.
right, so Chris, what I'm assuming is, yeah, so,
Right.
so if someone does, they say, I'm assuming this is just kind of a fishing expedition, but some, um, but those sometimes they'll drop a name and they'll say they gave us a list of people to call, you know,
And you were
so
high up on that list.
you
So
were, and what I would say is, how big is that list?
yeah.
How did they develop that list? What types of people are on that list? Help me understand why I'm on that list. How do I fit into this list?
And
Not, yeah,
so, and let me jump in here, Chris, because I actually am someone, and I'm sure Dan is too. You probably are, because I know you've worked strategically with several of your clients over the years. I actually have been in situations, a number of situations, where I've had longstanding client firms who I partner with, and they feel that they partner with me strategically to help them achieve their initiatives, where I do get those kinds of requests. Very
yeah.
specific, very, and sometimes it's a short list of 4 or 5 names. Sometimes it's one person that they want to talk to. Okay. And, you know, the depth at which someone who has been given that type of a request should have information about the individual that they're calling is really, as Dan kind of illustrated in his question, is really discernible pretty quickly. Like when I get those kinds of requests, I know the clients that it focuses around, that the firm either wants to break into or feels that there's a need to bring on that person to help solidify and expand the relationship. I know the strategic initiative of the firm that's very specifically rooted in bringing in that person. I know what the exact role or the range of role that the firm would be looking at when talking to someone like that. And you know, if some when I make those calls, if people ask me those questions, and they ask me something that I can't answer, I can say, look, you know what? That's a piece of information I don't have. I'm happy to get that for you before you decide to do anything on this. But just know that this is, that I've been tasked with this. And look, I'll tell you, one of the best defensive mechanisms, although I've always had to be honest with people, sometimes you'll get that one part that says, have you been retained to call only me? And my answer to that is no, because I work directly with leadership and I'm not asking them for a retainer up front. But I can assure you, and some guys will say, hey, not good enough. They didn't pay you money just to call me,
Yeah.
then I'm not taking the call, right? But at the end of the day, it really does get down to the types of questions that you as a partner on the other end of the line are asking to pin down that recruiter, to show that they have the chops, the cred, and the actual relationship that they're claiming that they have.
And the best question you can ask as a recipient of these calls is just say, can you take about a minute and just tell me a little bit about their search, their need, their strategy, and how someone like me um, fits into that and why I'm on the list. Now, again,
Yep.
I'm not just being, I'm not saying I'm looking to make a move, because some recruiters will say, all right, if they're asking those questions, that means that we've got one on the hook.
Right.
So I'd be, I'm just curious. Tell me a little bit, because I always, when someone reaches out in this fashion, tell me a little bit about the bigger picture here, because I'm curious about this. And if they can't speak about the search for at least 60 seconds, they don't know. They're just going off, and if you can hear them looking on a website, oh, this is a firm that's got offices in Washington, D.C., New York, Charlotte,
Yep.
Chicago, Boston. Yeah, 9 offices, profit. And if it looks like they're reading through a script,
Yep.
bullshit.
Yep.
Sorry, Chris. This is the second time I've cursed on one of your podcasts. I think, right. But that's really literally, if they can't talk about it for 30 to 60 seconds, something might, that's a good sign.
It is a good sign, and it's also like with me, pressure tactics. Are they
Yeah.
giving you pressure tactics? Are they trying to hustle you? Do you feel like, they're trying to suck up your time or get an answer quickly to move you on the process? So what I hear you both saying is slow down, ask good questions, ask for detail, and don't be satisfied with that only with the quick answers.
And
Um,
and also say you are not authorized to go back to the firm and
Good.
speak on my behalf in any way.
Yeah.
Because
You are,
Dan,
yeah,
that's a huge point. And one thing Dan is honing in on here is there are a ton of recruiters that are very experienced, have been pushing the envelope for years. And if you give them, the old saying, if you give them an inch of rope, they want to be a cowboy or cowgirl. They will take that and go back to a firm and say, "Hey,
Yeah.
I've gotten this person on the line that this person's expressed interest. Would you
they
have
want to
interest
know
in that?"
more.
Yeah, in the profile, and the firm says, "Yeah, we would." And then they take that and go back and say, "Oh, they reaffirm that you've been asked for because I've already checked it out with them, right?" Like it's a shell game hustle that goes on here
So
at
let's
this
let-
level.
let's let's dig into this point a little bit more because I agree with you, and this is a really important value for our company is express permission. What is express permission? How does that work? And so if I'll just speak to it with what we do with our candidates is I tell my team, never, ever, ever do anything with anybody's information until you get express permission. And they know, the candidates, you partners know exactly what we're doing, where we're going, who we're talking to, so none of it's a surprise. So every partner, if you have to ask that recruiter, what are you going to do with this? And you only have express permission to do X.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, absolutely,
Yes.
absolutely.
Sometimes, it's best if it's in writing. Sometimes getting it in writing can create other types of issues because
Problems.
sometimes people don't check their email as much and
Right.
timing can be important, so there's got to be a level of trust. And sometimes I'll follow up and say, just confirming I'm reaching out to this firm, because having a track record, a paper trail of those things is really important. But yeah, it's Gary, what you said is exactly what they'll take your questions and turn that into
Answers.
exactly. And
Yeah,
I
you know,
love that phrase, roping the
yeah,
cowboy.
yeah. No, like so, but like with I train and I beat it into the heads of my recruiters that I've hired and raised up, and I ask even when I'm having a conversation where a partner's like, "Yeah, this sounds great. I could really be interested in that." They give me and I say I always at the end of the conversation or at some point towards the end, I say I just want to clarify and make sure that I have your express authorization
Yep.
to make the approach to the firm as we've discussed here. And I want you to know that with respect to any other firms, even if you said, Gary, look, I want you to handle my search, I will not be doing anything without discussing that firm with you first and getting express authorization to each and every one to act on your behalf, right? Because you do need now. I tend not to ask for it in writing a whole bunch because that there's also the issues of some of the plausible deniability for the partner who says,
Right.
"Oh, I don't want to put it in writing that I'm out
Right.
looking or I'm willing to have a
Right.
conversation,"
Right.
right? So, but I think it is a really, you know, important thing that and a lot that as we train people in the industry and as we mentor people in the industry, always get express authorization. I've actually dealt with it in joint venture situations with other recruiters who have brought me in and want to, work a deal with me, and they'll say, "Yeah, I'm working with this group, and they want something like this," and we give them an opportunity they like, and then they want me to put them in something. Did we get express authorization to, and I make sure even with an experienced recruiter, I need to know that you have express authorization for me to act on this or for us to act on this, right?
Yeah.
So,
And this kind of dovetails into the Now's Code of Ethics,
yes.
which, and this could be like its own session, but candidates, there's Article 2, Section 3 that says candidates shall be submitted to employers only with the candidate's express prior consent.
Yeah.
So NALSC is a trade association that has a code of ethics that in order to join NALSC, you agree to abide by this code of ethics. It's the closest we've got to some sort of regulation over bad behavior. However, the jurisdiction only encompasses search firms who are members of NALSC. So if there's a NALSC member search firm, and there are about 200 of them, one of them is doing something shady, you can file an ethics complaint against them. However, if there's some, renegade recruiter who's, making calls, creating problems, and they're not members of NALSC, they're not held to any level of accountability other than violating the law. And so to go after them, you would have to sue them or, legally. Otherwise, plus there's a whole issue in terms of privacy of contract and things like that.
And Dan, real quick, just because I know we may have listeners who, just in case you don't know, NALSC is the National Association of Legal Search Consultants. Okay,
yes.
and it's been in operation for, gosh,
probably
35 plus 35, 40 years, right? So, but yeah, it's, and that's another thing, you can always ask a recruiter if they're a member of NALSC. Have they ever, engaged with NALSC? Have they, right? Like you can, because firms, you'll notice firms, even in their fee agreements with outside recruiting shops, will put that they are members of NALSC or that they hold their recruiters to the NALSC ethics and bylaws, standards of ethics, outlined in the bylaws. So that's another safeguard as far as we know. It's not enforceable per se outside the organization, but it is another way to safeguard, your process as a partner as well.
Yeah, and there are very good recruiters who are not members of NALSC because they've made decisions that the code of ethics is not something that they want to abide by as an entire organization, and there may be, reasons for that other than them being shady. For example, there's certain provisions in there, but you have the highest likelihood of knowing that someone's going to abide by a certain code of ethics if they are members of NALSC. It's not guaranteed, but it's the closest you can get to some sort of enforcement mechanism.
Gentlemen, I hate to do this, but we need to bring this to a close.
We're just getting started.
I know. We could do a 3-hour session probably. So just for my listeners to know, we're going to be doing more of these. You're going to see these two gentlemen's faces more often. We're going to have more shows and lots of topics to discuss.
Chris, take us out to Hawaii and we can do these live. You'll take me and Gary out to Maui or something, and we'll do these live on the beach.
That sounds fantastic. Yeah. I love your idea, Dan.
All the time in the world.
Right, exactly. So Gary and Dan, how can people find you, contact you?
You can find me on the web at milespartnerplacement.com. Also, I'm on LinkedIn. So, happy to be found at either one of those locations.
Awesome. You can just Google Dan Binstock. Our company's website is g-s.com, or you can go to lateralpartners.com, which is a free website with a bunch of resources dealing with lateral partners and things like that.
Yeah.
Cool.
And one other thing, Chris, I can say, 'cause I'll say this for Dan. There are other ways to diligence recruiters. You can find us in Law Dragon as recognized as amongst the global top 100 legal strategists and consultants, features and stuff. There are ways to find out who in this industry is operating, both ethically and at the highest levels.
Gary and Dan, thank you for your time today.
Thank you, Chris.
So much, Chris, for inviting us. Always enjoy it.
Yeah. See you,
Take
Gary.
care.
Take care.